What you don't know about long arm quilting. In today's video, we're gonna go over some myths, the full process of how the long arm works, and in addition to that, some tips and tricks to make sure that your quilt turns out even better. Let's get started. So before we get to the long arming itself, we gotta talk about the quilt, because all of the problems, all of the changes, and all the things that can happen during long arming all starts with the quilt itself. And this is a fantastic example, guys, of a quilt that's not quite perfect, okay? Now, obviously, this quilt needs a really good press just to get everything to lay flat. It's been folded up, but there are some flaws in this quilt that will make it more difficult for a long armer. Now, there's a myth out there that if you long arm more dense or put more stitches per square inch, that will hide all of the imperfections in a quilt. And that's simply not true. The long armer can kind of work their magic a little bit, but they cannot solve all of the problems. So let's first start off with, let's first start off with the one that everyone is guilty of, is that the quilt doesn't actually measure square. What I mean by that, this quilt is 71 inches. It's supposed to measure 72. If this quilt is a true quilt, it's supposed to be a rectangle or a square, the sides here are supposed to be parallel with each other, meaning that right here in the center, I should also have 71 inches wide. So now right here in the center, it's only 70 inches wide. So my top is bigger than my center. Now let's check the bottom here. It's 72 inches. So it grows 1 inch going that direction. So in reality, instead of it being a rectangle, it actually has a slight cutoff or curve going towards the bottom. This quilt is not square. So we have to understand that quilts that are not square have issues on long arms. That's one of the reasons why we can have issues with our long arming. I'm gonna flip this quilt over so you can see the back. So when I flip it to the back here, and it's kind of one of those myths out there, people are like, oh, well, you see how this is pressed this direction, that's pressed that direction. As far as a long arm, the actual machine cares, it doesn't know which way your seams are pressed. Pressing your seams one way or the other is normally to reduce bulk and to make sure that fabric isn't shown through on the other side in our light colors. For instance, if I push this over this direction, that pink could show through my white. It doesn't really have much to do with the long arming, other than these center pieces can get a little bulky. Bulkiness, most long armers can work around. That's not really a problem. What is a problem though is come look at these seams here up close. I've got a 1/4 inch seam, that's almost a 1/2 inch seam, an 1/8 inch seam. An 1/8 inch seam is terrible because that's where you can have tear out, and a 3/8 inch seam all in this block here. This particular quilt is from one of our brand new team members who's just learning how to quilt, and they've done an excellent job. This is a fantastic first quilt. So I don't want anyone to think out there I'm just roasting this person. I am not. But it's also the best way to show you guys at the same time. This 1/8 inch seam here has a high % chance that when we put it on the long arm, we're gonna add tension to our quilt top, which can tear out the seam. If there's not enough there holding it together, we can have tear out. And also, I've got like a 1/2 inch seam here. This is the reason why on one side it's small and on the other side it's big, is because starting on one side of the seam, it's let's say a 1/4 inch, and on the other side, it's 3/4 of an inch. There's these big discrepancies, making it so this quilt is not perfectly square, and we're not running the risk of having tear out. The reason why I'm showing this quilt, guys, is so that when we go over to the long arms, you can see how quilts become under tension. There can be lots of problems, and these might be problems that you guys are facing with today. Solutions to all these is one, take your time, make sure you keep a consistent 1/4 inch, and also, because I know what happened with this particular quilt, this block was supposed to be, 14 inches square, and this one was 14, this was 14 and 8, this one was 13 and 7/8. All those little teeny things compound into this bigger problem. And again, long arms don't know what's underneath them. They don't know how well you pieced anything, they don't know anything like that. It's a machine that goes from left to right or right to left. It's kind of loading paper into one of the old school typewriters. It's going to do what it does. If you put the paper in wrong though, it's never going to work and it's going to jam. Or it can not come out at the quality that you like. Let's see a fantastic example of what a quilt should look like. Quilt number 2 here. This is done by one of our sample makers here in house that has been here for many, many years, a fantastic quilter. Obviously, this quilt is done 100% on point. One of the hardest ways to actually get things to stay square and to stay straight. Let's look at these back seams as well. There are perfect 1/4 inch seams all the way down. Now, obviously this quilt's been folded up, and so there's a little bit of twisting. But generally speaking here, just a fantastic, fantastic quilt here. And when you measure this quilt down both sides or across, you'll realize that from left to right, top and bottom, they stay parallel with each other. This particular quilt right here will have many more challenges for the long armer than this one, simply due to the seams that are here, and how far it is out of square. If you're still progressing the craft and you're enjoying yourself, if your quilt measures 51 by 50, it should have been 50 by 50, it's not a big deal. I'm just trying to help you out here a little bit to make it even better for the long arming experience. So now that we've talked about the quilt top here, a lot of people talk about the back of a quilt. Now, I would say most people don't put seams in the back of their quilt, so there's never really much of a problem there. But the moral of the story with the seam in the back of your quilt, as long as you cut it semi-good and that you have enough bulk there, it's not an 1/8 inch seam, you're fine. And as far as the batting goes, high quality batting gets you a high quality result, but that's only for the longevity of the quilt itself. It doesn't really have anything to do with the long arm, because the long arm doesn't know if it's bad batting, good batting, fluffy batting, or very thin batting. Again, that's just personal preferences there. We're gonna head over to the long arm now so you can see all the mechanics behind this. So we're at the long arm. So we're at the long arm right now, and we've skipped through a couple of steps here, like checking in a quilt, things like that. And so once that whole process is done, it ends up going to the long arm itself. Now, there's gears on this machine where I can click a button and it's going to do a design that is programmed into this machine. Now, that's very linear. It can go left and right, and it can move forwards and backwards. And so we can do curves, we can do all those kinds of shapes. But what I'm saying is it's not rotating the quilt by itself. And additionally, it's not adjusting for if at the top of the quilt it's 72 inches, at the bottom of the quilt is 70 inches. It's not making those adjustments because, again, the machine doesn't know what it's sewing. It just knows how to do it. So since it's a very linear system, I'm gonna put my backing onto a bar. I'm gonna hook it onto this back bar here. I'm gonna pull them until that backing becomes taut. Then from there, we're gonna add our batting and our top, and then we're gonna base down that top, and then we can start long arming. Now this is the same for both free motion quilting and for edge-to-edge quilting. Both systems are exactly the same. The thing with edge-to-edge quilting, I program my little computer here, and let's say I grab the side that's 70 inches wide, and the bottom of my quilt is 72 inches wide. Let's say I plug this into my program here, I type in, give myself a buffer as well, and I type it in as 71 inches. When I get to the bottom of my quilt, it's gonna be very noticeable that the pattern just kind of cuts off right at the very bottom. The long armor doesn't know everything that's happened to your quilt. The long armor simply knows what was turned into them. That's a mistake that can be easily avoided by checking a bunch of different spots on your quilt. Additionally, we're gonna head over to a quilt that's long arming right now. This machine right now is currently long arming. We've got it all based down. You can see the design work being put over the top. And again, you can see how I've got tension. It's almost like a trampoline here on my backing, which is connected to my batting and my top. These seams right here, all the way down on every single spot here, are being put under tension. We need that tension to hold everything taut for us so that the machine can do its magic over the top of it. Without that, you can end up getting puckers, you can end up having pleats in your quilt, so we need the tension put on this. And again, going back to what we talked about just a minute ago, is if these seams aren't done properly, you can have tear out. It's a very common thing that happens. I would probably say that we get tear out on somebody's quilt, a customer's quilt, probably once a week, where we have to come back in and repair that spot because it could not hold the tension that's going to be put under. If it's tearing out on a machine, it's definitely going to have tear out when a person's using it, throwing in the washing machine, throwing in the dryer. That's why it's so important. It doesn't really have much to do with the long arming, because a little tear out on a quilt, the long armor could just ignore, but then that just means when you're washing and things like that, it's going to tear out there instead. So we try to do the very best we can to fix all those as we're going through. Then additionally, as we are sewing, and this quilt is under tension, all those seams that are a little bit off are compounding. It happens quite often in long arming that your quilt starts off as 70 inches long, let's say. As we put tension on it, it's stretching open those seams, or there's too much wiggle room in our seams. And so it begins to stretch that out. And instead of your quilt being 70 inches square, it turns out to be 72 inches square. It can stretch that far depending on how many seams are in it. So it matters so much that we do all of our seams correctly. Now, bring you over here, I think this quilt was a great one. You can see we got this beautiful color palette here. I love how they didn't use just a plain white background. They did something a little different. But you can see how we're putting lots of stitching into this quilt. The amount of stitching doesn't change how off a quilt is. It's kind of a myth in the industry of like, oh yeah, the long armor can just fix that. The long armor can't fix if a quilt is parallel with itself or not. If this quilt is super off, what will happen, and I'll bring you up here close, what can happen is this becomes wavy, and then it starts puckering all across one edge. It can also happen that it starts stretching out the other direction, and at the very bottom everything puckers because there's no room to take the fabric. There's no way to put it somewhere else. The quilt is designed, and all quilt patterns are designed to hit a certain measurement or be really, really close to it. The more off we are in that, the more puckers and the more chances of pleats will happen. Good? With all this information, it is not to discourage someone. It is not so that when you pull your tape on your quilt and you see that it's out of square to make you feel bad. It's simply to make you more mindful of what you're doing. The reality is that longarmers deal with problems all the time when they're doing your quilt, or maybe you're the longarmer and you're dealing with all the problems. You deal with the problems and you don't say anything. The reason being is because you're a service. It's just like the landscaper. The landscaper comes and does all your landscape, and it looks great, and he'll never tell you that so-and-so broke the head off your sprinkler, or that there's a ant's hill over here that he had to take up. They're not gonna say that because they want to continue doing your service for you. It's the same thing in longarming. They're gonna do the best they can to give you the best result every single time. And when there is a little pucker, they're not going to come to you and say, hey, your quilt was out of square by 2 inches, that's why that puckered. Because we want to encourage you to continue going on in this craft. But again, that then also perpetuates the problem because no one's talking about it. That's the reason why we're making this video, is that if your longarmer calls you and there's tear out in one of your seams, you now know what that was. If your quilt is getting puckered on one corner or the other, it's most likely that those seams aren't perfect, your quilt's out of square, there's some other facet going on rather than the longarmer's not a good longarmer. Because I know some amazing longarmers out there, and granted, longarmers can work a little bit of magic to help things out, but they're not wizards. They can't fix every single problem on your quilt. With that, I hope you've enjoyed this video and that the information can help you out on your quilting experience. And again, this video is not to make you feel bad or make you feel like less of a quilter. I'm gonna be honest, one of my last quilts was off by over an inch. It happens sometimes. Sometimes we get in a rush on steps that we shouldn't be rushing. But at the end of the day, it's about making beautiful items, and most of us donate them to charity, we give them to loved ones. And so to have a little pucker here or a pucker there doesn't really matter. No one will actually see the puckers. No one will actually see a little wrinkle on the quilt because it's not their hobby, it's not their craft. And so they're going to love and appreciate it for the gift which it is. And with that, guys, if you liked this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and don't be afraid to share it with your friends. And guys, also, if you like videos like this, let us know by dropping a comment or telling us what the next video you'd like to see. And while you're down in that comment section, you might as well check out the description and check out SoyaQuilting.com, where you can see any of the fabric that you've seen here during this video, and additionally, many of the quilts as well. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.